At 02:47 a.m. over the Black Sea, the night sky above Crimea shimmered with static. Somewhere in that darkness, Russian radar screens began to glitch, tiny flickers, barely visible, then gone. Operators squinted at the faint returns, thinking it was just sea clutter, but within seconds, alarms wailed. A cluster of unidentified objects was racing toward Mount Petri, home to Russia's most advanced air defense radars, the so-called Eyes of Crimea. What followed in the next 15 minutes would rewrite modern warfare. Russia's multi-billion-ruble defense shield, a network of S-400s, Pantsir systems and early warning radars, would be torn apart by weapons that cost less than a household appliance. This was not a random skirmish, it was a calculated experiment, a test by Ukrainian engineers to expose something Moscow never thought possible, the blind spots of its own empire. But here's the question that still echoes through military briefings across Europe and the Pentagon alike. How did a handful of consumer-grade drones humiliate one of the most powerful air defense systems on Earth? Tonight, we'll take you inside the operation, minute by minute, breaking down the science, the strategy, and the shocking implications that now define a new era of drone warfare. Because this wasn't just an attack, it was a demonstration that in modern war it's not size or strength that wins. It's signal, silence, and geometry. The world's most advanced radar couldn't see what was right in front of it. The missiles worth millions fired into empty air. And as smoke rose from the shattered domes of Mount Petri, the future of warfare, cheap, silent, algorithm-driven, was being written in real time. Stay with us. We're about to decode how this happened, why it changes everything, and what it means for every military power on Earth that still believes defense can keep up with innovation. The story of that night didn't begin on Crimea's cliffs. It started hundreds of kilometers away, in a dimly lit warehouse near Odessa. Rows of stripped-down racing drones sat on metal tables, their carbon frames glinting under fluorescent light. But these weren't toys anymore. They were repurposed precision weapons, each one armed with a shaped charge and a processor board reprogrammed for combat. Ukrainian engineers called them mosquitoes. Small, cheap, and nearly impossible to detect. What made them deadly wasn't firepower, but coordination. Every drone was connected through a mesh network of floating relay boats sitting quietly off Crimea's coast. These vessels acted like floating cell towers, using Starlink terminals and encrypted radio links to control swarms from hundreds of kilometers away. By late October, satellite reconnaissance showed something remarkable. Russia's air defense network over Crimea was stretched thin. Many of its best radar systems had been repositioned toward the north, expecting conventional missile attacks, not drones flying 50 meters above the sea. Ukraine's defense planners saw an opportunity. For months, they had been testing swarm algorithms, teaching groups of drones to scatter, regroup, and approach from multiple angles, confusing radar filters that prioritized larger targets. The logic was simple: overwhelm the computer, not the soldier. At 00:10 a.m., orders came down the chain. The objective: neutralize the radar complexes at Mount Petri, blind the network, then let the rest fall. It was a mission no one had ever tried before, a strike built entirely on physics and timing. Russia's radar systems, like the Podlyut K1 and 96L6E, were among the best in the world, capable of tracking ballistic missiles and stealth aircraft. But they all shared one fatal weakness: the Doppler notch, a flaw in how radar interprets motion. When an object moves sideways across a radar beam rather than toward or away from it, its radial velocity drops to zero, blending into background clutter. In essence, the drone becomes invisible, a ghost gliding across the sky. That vulnerability became the foundation of the operation. Drones would fly low and perpendicular to radar beams, hugging the terrain and sea surface, entering the Russian detection field through the blind cone that every radar possesses due to the Earth's curvature. The brilliance of this plan wasn't in its complexity, but in its simplicity. A $400 drone exploiting a flaw in billion-dollar systems. Physics turned into strategy. As technicians powered up the first swarm, one of them muttered under his breath, "They'll never see it coming." He was right. Within 2 hours, the most protected airspace in the Black Sea would go dark, not because of superior weapons, but because someone finally understood how to outthink the radar. To understand why the attack on Mount Petri succeeded, we have to look beyond the explosions, into the invisible battlefield of frequencies, reflections, and geometry. Modern air defense isn't just metal and missiles, it's an orchestra of sensors working in perfect mathematical harmony. Break the rhythm, and the music collapses. Russia's radar network over Crimea relied on 3 layers. The 96L6E scanning the upper atmosphere, the Podlyot K1 sweeping the mid-altitude, and Pantsir S1 systems protecting the gaps. Each radar transmits electromagnetic pulses that bounce off objects and return as echoes, the core idea behind detection. The problem? Those echoes only reveal part of the truth. When an object moves directly toward the radar, the frequency of the returning signal shifts slightly higher. When it moves away, slightly lower, the Doppler effect. That frequency shift tells the computer an object's speed and direction. But if a target slides sideways across the beam, its radial velocity becomes nearly zero. To the radar's algorithms, it looks identical to ground clutter, stationary noise. This is the Doppler notch, the mathematical blind spot Ukraine built its entire strategy around. Flying at 50 meters altitude, Ukrainian FPV drones move perfectly through that notch, their small propellers generating signals too weak to rise above the noise floor. The background static every receiver constantly hears. To the radar, the drones simply didn't exist. Even when missiles were fired blindly, their guidance systems faced their own limitations. Proximity fuses require a radar cross-section roughly the size of a car door to detonate, half a square meter of reflection. These drones reflected 1/100th of that. Each missile streaked through the night and self-destructed harmlessly in open air. The thermal seekers fared no better. Infrared missiles like the R-73 hunt for jet engines glowing above 1,000 degrees C. Electric drone motors barely hit 50 degrees C and about the warmth of a laptop. The seekers couldn't lock on until they were already too close and moving too fast to turn. The result? 4 multi-million ruble missiles defeated by physics, not jamming. For years, Russian doctrine assumed defense through scale. More missiles, more radar coverage, higher power output. But this operation proved something uncomfortable. In electronic warfare, more can actually mean less. Amplify the signal, and you amplify the noise. Complexity breeds new blind spots. In a few minutes of flight, the Mosquito drones revealed that 20th century air defense was designed for fast, loud enemies, not quiet ones that think sideways. As dawn approached, every radar dome that once scanned the skies above the Black Sea was about to learn the same lesson. It's not stealth coating that makes a weapon invisible anymore. It's strategy shaped by science. When the smoke cleared over Mount Petri, Russia's most advanced radar domes were burning husks. But the true damage wasn't physical, it was psychological. For the first time, Moscow's generals realized their greatest fear. The age of predictable warfare was over. Every major power watched the footage in disbelief. Military analysts from NATO to Beijing replayed the thermal recordings frame by frame, searching for something that wasn't there the moment the drones became visible. But there was no such moment. They had slipped through the cracks of the radar network like whispers through a storm. The implications were enormous. If a nation could build an invisible swarm for the price of a family car, no fortress was truly safe. Think about it. A $400 drone had neutralized systems designed to defeat hypersonic missiles. This wasn't just an embarrassment, it was a strategic revolution. The world had entered a new era, one where quantity beats quality, and intelligence outmaneuvers hardware. Traditional air defense relies on predictability, fixed positions, known radar frequencies, and centralized command systems. But swarms, they are chaos by design. Each drone thinks independently, yet acts collectively, guided by algorithms that learn, adapt, and confuse. If that sounds futuristic, it's not. In the weeks after the Crimea strike, Western defense think tanks began publishing grim assessments. One RAND analyst wrote, "We are witnessing the collapse of the 20th century air defense paradigm. The line between civilian and military technology has officially blurred." Now imagine what happens when these principles scale. 1,000 low-cost drones coordinated by AI, not humans. Ships, airfields, and radar networks overwhelmed in minutes, not by missiles, but by math. For Russia, the immediate consequence was blindness. With its radar network crippled, early warning coverage across southern Crimea vanished. S-400 systems sat silent, unable to track low-altitude threats. The very systems once marketed as impenetrable were now proving to be decorations on the battlefield. For Ukraine, the message was clear. If they could exploit one blind spot, they could exploit 1,000. And for the rest of the world, especially nations pouring billions into traditional defense, the question was unavoidable. What if this is only the beginning? What if future wars aren't fought with jets and missiles, but with silent machines no larger than a backpack, slipping through radar shadows, crippling empires before anyone knows they're under attack? That night over Crimea wasn't just a battle. It was a preview of the next century, a war where the most powerful weapon isn't firepower or armor. It's understanding how to disappear. Within 48 hours of the Mount Petri strike, encrypted cables began flashing across defense ministries worldwide. Washington, London, Ankara, Beijing all asked the same question. If Russia's radar can be blinded, can ours? For decades, global defense strategy was built around one core belief: superiority through scale. Bigger radars, stronger missiles, faster jets. But the Ukraine operation proved that speed and power mean little if you can't see the enemy. Now, every nation is racing to solve that problem, and each is doing it differently. In the United States, the Pentagon's DARPA division quietly expanded Project Alpha Swarm, a classified AI-driven radar network that uses distributed microsensors instead of massive domes. Imagine thousands of small radar nodes scattered across a city, each one weak alone, but collectively forming a web that no object can slip through. In other words, a digital nervous system for the battlefield. Meanwhile, European engineers are experimenting with passive radar, a technology that doesn't transmit at all. Instead, it listens for reflections from existing signals, radio towers, cell networks, even Wi-Fi, creating a detection field impossible to jam or target. Unlike traditional radars, passive systems hide in plain sight, turning every civilian frequency into a defense shield. Russia, humiliated but not defeated, turned to brute force. The Kremlin ordered the deployment of neural network-based detection suites and multispectral sensors, combining radar, infrared, acoustic, and optical inputs into a single AI analysis system. The goal: eliminate the Doppler notch entirely by teaching computers to see patterns in the chaos of background noise. If successful, even a sparrow-sized drone could be tracked in real time. But technology alone won't fix the deeper flaw exposed that night: the doctrine problem. Modern air defense still thinks in lines and layers, assuming attacks come from predictable directions. The drone swarm rewrote that rulebook. It doesn't matter how thick the wall is if the attack flows around it. That's why militaries are shifting from defensive grids to adaptive clouds, networks that move, learn, and reconfigure themselves dynamically, guided by AI. Every radar, missile, and sensor becomes part of a living organism, a self-healing digital ecosystem that reacts in seconds. At the same time, new theories are emerging. controversial ones. Some strategists argue for biological camouflage systems, coating drones in organic materials that absorb radar waves like living skin. Others propose electromagnetic mirage fields, creating thousands of false targets to drown real threats in noise. The future battlefield, they say, won't be about destruction at all. It will be about perception. Who controls what the enemy sees? In a world where invisibility is power, the next war won't start with missiles. It will start with a moment of silence on a radar screen, when the system sees nothing, but the danger is already there. As the sun rose over the Black Sea, smoke from Mount Ipetri drifted like a ghost across the horizon, a quiet monument to a war that had changed everything. For centuries, power was measured in missiles, tanks, and men, but that morning proved something far more unsettling. The most powerful weapon of the 21st century is knowledge, invisible, mathematical, and silent. What began as a tactical drone raid became a philosophical turning point in warfare itself. The strike didn't just expose the weakness of radar, it exposed the fragility of assumption. Every superpower had believed the same myth, that more technology equals more security. But Ukraine, using a fraction of that power, rewrote the equation. It's ironic. For decades, nations invested billions trying to build stealth jets, shaping metal, absorbing radar, hiding heat signatures. Yet invisibility was achieved not through machinery, but through strategy born from understanding the laws of physics. In the shadow of Ipetri, a new age was born, the cognitive battlefield. Here, wars aren't fought with steel or fire, but with perception, timing, and data. The victor isn't the one who hits hardest, it's the one who sees differently. Across the globe, military doctrines are being rewritten. Training programs now include data science, electronic warfare, and behavioral AI. Pilots are replaced by coders, and radar operators by mathematicians. The soldier of tomorrow may not carry a rifle, he'll carry a laptop. But there's a darker side. As detection and deception become digital, the line between offense and defense blurs. If you can make a drone invisible, you can make a missile invisible. If you can blind a radar, you can blind a nation. And once machines begin to decide what is real and what is noise, who will control the truth? Some theorists already warn of a coming singularity of warfare, a moment when AI-guided systems begin to wage battles faster than humans can comprehend, reacting in milliseconds, evolving strategies mid-conflict, wars that start and end before the first human even realizes they've begun. So what happens next? Perhaps the world will adapt, learning to coexist with this new invisible threat. Or perhaps the lesson of Mount Ipetri will fade into arrogance until another nation repeats the same mistake. But one truth remains unshakable. The future battlefield won't look like the past. There will be no front lines, no borders, no warning, only silence. And somewhere, in that silence, the next revolution in warfare will already have begun, unseen, unheard, unstoppable.